Hello, hello.
Hi, Hugh. How's it going?
Hi, Benji. How are you doing?
Yeah, all right. Got a bit of a sore throat at the moment.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Getting sick is no fun.
indeed.
Yeah, well, sorry to hear that. Is that something that just happened like right when the weekend started? So you had a nice weekend dealing with it?
Of course, yes.
Oh, yeah, that's just the
How
way.
did you predict?
It's just always the way it works out. Yeah. Uh,
How
hello,
are you?
Benoit. I'm good. I'm
Hi.
good. I totally was not stuffing my face just literally before I joined the call. So, yeah, just cramming my third breakfast in. Hello, Ivan. Hello, Rob. How's it going? Happy Monday. Monday in the future for some of us. Not Rob and I. Is it just us today? I don't know if I can see that on the calendar invite or not. Maybe I can. Should be a few more folks joining. Rob, thanks very much for keeping this all up to date and captured in the discussions. Super helpful.
Yeah, no problem. I posted a few things over the weekend that I wanted to talk through today.
Yeah, saw them. I think that makes sense. Give folks another minute to join if other people are joining, but Alessia's joining. Great. Hello, Alessia.
Hi, everyone.
Happy Monday. Cool. Well, I don't know. Should we just dive in?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
I can share my screen. 1 second.
Sounds good. We can see it.
Yeah, so after last week's meeting, we mostly agreed on moving forward with this option 4, where we had a static deduplication algorithm, and I was working on implementing that based off work that Yakov had done. And so just to summarize, what Yakov had built originally was only deduplicating leaf fields, and it was my understanding that that's not what we wanted. So for this example, you have a defer with a nested object, same field inside of them. ID gets deduplicated because that's a leaf field, but nested object is not. You still have this defer with a empty object being returned. So I started working on how do we actually deduplicate object fields that as you're working up the tree in GraphQL.js, which is the same algorithm that the spec does mostly. What I came up with was doing something like when a field is deduplicated, instead of just removing it, we return some kind of a JavaScript symbol, but just any kind of unique value that the implementation could track. And if all of your fields inside an object were deduplicated, then the parent would also get deduplicated, and you could work up the tree that way. I don't know if there's a better way, but that was what I came up with, just trying to figure something out. And that works for this case. So now we can know that nested object is totally deduplicated and not even return that defer. And you would get this result. But what happens if a nested object returns null? So in that case, you're not even going to start looking at the fields that are underneath it, because once it returns null, you can't go down any further.
Mhm.
And so now we don't have the opportunity to see like, are all the fields deduplicated, and instead it's not deduplicated anymore. And that differs from an algorithm that I imagine that you're doing. If you're doing like a static query rewrite, you would traverse this whole thing and know this shouldn't be here and remove it.
Mhm.
And now you have a different result. And like another thing you could do is like, well, it's null, so I'll treat it as a leaf field. And does nested object not, like it's also in the parent, so I could dedupe that and get back to the same result of one payload. But like, to show why that doesn't work exactly is if the fields are actually different and it shouldn't be deduplicated, it's it could in that case then, if
Hi
you're only
guys,
looking at
right now we're duplicating leaves. Could we change that to be?
Nope, Yakov, we lost you.
what was that?
Oh, hey, sorry, I disconnected for a second. I missed your response, Rob.
I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, sorry. My bad. So I'm just wondering, we're deduplicating leaves now, I think by saving the path. Could we just record also the path of anything that ends up being null? I haven't looked into it too deeply, but is that too difficult?
I think the problem is not, I'm not sure that this is like someone, what I'm trying to explain here is that if you do have a null, but there are non-overlapping fields underneath it, a static algorithm would not be deduplicating it, but an algorithm that doesn't actually traverse down into the fields beneath that null wouldn't know that, and you would have a different result. And I guess that's kind of like what I think with last meeting, we had the assumption that you could write something that worked in GraphQL.js and would give you the same results as an algorithm that was statically rewriting queries, but I don't think that that's the case.
Rob,
Yeah.
excuse me, sore throat. You're talking about a thing being null. Are you talking about nested object being null here?
Yes.
So in that case, it wouldn't be able to collect more fields anyway. I'm assuming this is like, it wouldn't be adding anything to be deferred. I think I might be misinterpreting what you've got going on here, but I imagined that it would be part of how the collect fields algorithm works. So you'd be effectively doing it via the value completion, collecting the fields together. So once you've got a field that is null, you'd at that point not collect anything else. I always imagined it coming through as like being a tweak to the collect field algorithm, where effectively you'll return a set of the fields that need to be evaluated now, and a set of fields that are effectively deferred. And because you would stop at the null, you wouldn't be adding any fields to like the deferred list to be done later. So you wouldn't really face an issue.
What if what if there was another object in between hero and nested object, and the defer was there, and that one was not null, but nested object was? So it's not like we tried to collect here and didn't get any, but we do actually. I could write out an example.
Yeah, please do.
Um,
Separately from that, I see you've got has next true in a couple of examples where I think you might have meant has next false. It's probably just copy paste error.
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I'm missing something here. So that's why I just want to talk it through.
Mhm.
Yeah, so does this change anything if nested object is null here, but not there? So now
Okay.
we went through the first round of collect fields. We have that this should not be in the initial payload and this should be deferred. And now when we get here, and this returns null, we don't know if it should be deduplicated or not because we're never looking at the subfields of that.
Yeah, so the collect fields algorithm works on a layer by layer basis. So when you're resolving the layer that's within the hero selection set, you would see that there is first object, which is not deferred, and then you would see another first object again, and you would effectively reconcile that to say, sure, any selections on that second first object would be deferred, but effectively you've only got one thing there with no defers. So then you'd move on to the next layer during the value completion, or at least that's what I would do in an algorithm that I would write based on this, which would be effectively equivalent to statically evaluating it up front, but you can do it on a, I think you can do it on a layer by layer basis via collect fields. You would need to add a little bit of extra like tracking to know that the selection set that you have on the first object field in the second instance of that is effectively inside of a defer and is thus deferred. And I think there'll be some complexity when you have like nested defers and tracking what those are, where they relate to each other. But I think it should be possible. I was hoping to write something up, but I've not got around to it yet, I'm afraid. Maybe it's best if I try and write something up before our next meeting and see if I can be more concrete on what I'm thinking.
Yeah, if you have time for that, that would be helpful. It might just be that I'm being biased by still basing off of my first implementation where every deferred fragment forks execution entirely, where what I'm still having like the case where when we get defers, we start executing those defers and get down into the tree. But I think you're saying something different where first object would only be executed once still, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's critically important, especially when you have, for example, a streamed field that exists both inside and outside of a defer. You still only want that stream to be created once. So I think it is critical for us to try and evaluate that. And now that the defer and stream don't have labels anymore, and we don't technically have to tie them to exactly where they are in the query, we could actually do more things that we couldn't do previously. So for example, we could just say, oh, now there's there's a pending thing at the hero first object nested object path. We don't actually have to say there's a pending thing at the hero path, arguably. I'm not necessarily saying that we should adopt that right now, but I'm just saying it is a possibility.
Okay. So I think I need to spend some more time with that, and I can work with you, or if you want to write up something first, that would be helpful.
I'll try and dedicate a couple hours to it this week.
I don't think we totally decided labels aren't still in the picture, or were we in agreement on that? Because I know we still have that as an open question. It was broken out separately.
With regard to labels or any other, I mean, there's two purposes for labels from what I understand, right? One is the identification, which I think we've ruled out. We don't need that because we might do named fragments or aliases on the parent field or whatever.
Right.
And the other one is in terms of indicating the order in which these things are executed. And I think that still has value. And I factored that into what I was saying before. Like,
got it.
It should still work, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. Are we, Rob, while you have this open, if you scroll down a little bit so we can see your example A, just the actual query itself. Oh, no, sorry, you were on it. Sorry, it was on the
Right.
label one that you were on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just right there. So what we're saying here is that all of these differs are merged, basically. So there's, everything's coming back together because they're part of the same object.
Yeah,
Is
go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, will that trip people up? Like, if there are people that really don't understand that much about how their business's GraphQL API is implemented, it's a front-end developer who's building an application, and they're realizing that parts of their query are slow. Some of the specific fields in a selection set are slow. So they add a couple of differs in, even though it's part of the same object. And they're thinking, hey, that really means that we're going to be able to split up the execution here. And these things will really just come back like, the promises are going to resolve whenever they resolve. They're not all being resolved together. But instead, what we're saying here is, no matter how many times you do that, they are actually all going to resolve together. And I'm just wondering if that, we know why that would be the case if we're understanding what's going on behind the scenes and why it would make sense for things to operate this way. I just don't know if people that are just trying to use defer would see the logic behind this. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's just a user education thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we want ultimately is alias fragments for that specific case, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I just got like an idea related to that discussion. If we say people should use alias fragments to say something should be executed in parallel, meaning like you untie things. Can we say same thing about like with tricky query we have in the beginning of the deduplication issue? Can we say like everything is merged, like even between parallel things? So like basically like treat defer as attribute of a field, and if you want to deduplication on if you want to disable deduplication, if you want to something execute in parallel, you need to do alias fragments. Like, because now, as you say, it's like it's weird mental model. Some things like merged and some not, and we base that on implementation details. But it's hard to, yeah, we can explain that we try with syntax, with semantics, we try as much as possible to deduplicate, and concrete rule based on what we can statically analyze and not. It's an answer. It's like logical answer and fair answer, but it's not the rule of thumb. So person looking at the query, person need to understand like some more complicated rules. Maybe if we think alias fragment is solution to like, it's like a mechanism to unblock, maybe we just say like everything gets like fully merged, fully deduplicated. So in initial query, slow field A and slow field B, they like everything is like merged. But to untie, if you want slow field A and slow field B to be like independent, you need to use alias fragment. And in that case, like mental model is simple. Like if you don't use alias fragments, everything is like bunch into like one thing as much as possible. Shift in initial response, everything else is shipped based on a layer and batched together. So swap field A and swap field B batched together. But if you want to have it independently, you use alias fragments. And in that case, like mental model for people, like easy, default behavior is deduplication, but you have full control to enable like in parallel execute, anti-stuff using alias fragments. I think like it's the simplest. Yeah, I will formulate it in the text. I just get this idea, and maybe it will be the simplest mental model we can have.
But we don't have a way to do full deduplication without removing the one payload per path constraint, right?
No, we can like we can merge stuff and create like if you show like entire example of a query, a bow example, like from deduplication issue, like top examples that you wrote, Rob. Yeah, example B. Which one is more complicated? So yeah, so we will send basically we will send GH and potentially swap field A and potentially swap field B as one payload, and we will send sorry, I was confused. Yeah, we will send first path basically like empty, and as much as things we can push into empty, meaning like GH and potentially swapped field B. And after that send, second payload will always be E and F, a potentially swapped field A. And if you want to untie them, you use alias fragments. In this case, like we keep like a rule of one per path. We just break a rule that current rule that parallel hierarchy execute independently. If defer is defined on different levels, that defers execute in parallel independently. In that case, we have like one payload per path. We have statically predictable shapes. We will have like we will basically have everything, except you will always have swap field B being delivered first, always, and swap field A always delivered like in subsequent payload. Without like, no matter which one will get the result first, you always have field B and then separately field A under like path A and B. And if you want to unlock parallel execution, you just use alias fragments.
So this one would always have to return first. And
yes,
this one would not have E and F because this one is guaranteed to be returned first.
Yeah.
But how would you unblock it with an alias fragment?
We'll put like you will alias E and F potentially swap B first defer. You put alias there, and we'll put and it's sent separately because like paths. No, I need to think about it. You're right. It's more complicated. I need to think more. Yeah, you found like I will write my. I will think more about that, and if I came up with something that work, I will write. Yeah, sorry, somebody calling me second time in a row. I need to pick up.
Yep. Those,
Yeah.
if what I've been saying would actually work, that doesn't line up with any of the options we have above, does it? I guess it's a variation of one of the options with a need to have alias fragments, be able to use alias fragments. That's a workaround. But to be determined if it would work.
I wrote a message into the chat, Hugh, regarding what you asked before with all the nested defers in
Right.
the same selection set. And I think effectively the way that I see it, where you've got sibling defers, then them merging makes a lot of sense because it's just like field merging. Effectively, if you imagine that the at defer is the same as a foo field, then a at defer A and an at defer B would become an at defer AB, same as foo A and foo B would become foo AB. But when it's when the defers are effectively at the same path but nested inside of each other,
yeah,
it does get more subtle. At the moment, I think what we're proposing is that we would merge all of those together.
Yeah, and that's the case that I was thinking is the one that would really trip people up.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's okay for us to do that and for it to be an educational thing, as you say. But it is definitely something that we should go into with our eyes open and make sure that we make, signpost it correctly, that we've thought about this and this is why we've decided to do it this particular way.
Yeah. And if the alias fragments are an option, then people can always opt out of it. And that could be okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a feeling that, when defer is more widespread, we're going to see a lot of developers who are like, oh, this field is slow. Hey, I can just put defer on it and not think about the ramifications at all. They're just going to be like, I'll just get this later. And then they're going to say, oh, that worked. Hey, this field's slow. I'm going to put defer on it too. And it's going to be in the same selection set. And they're not really going to think about what that means behind the scenes. And they're just going to expect to see the same type of behavior when they do that as they did with the first field. And all of a sudden they might start to realize, oh, wait a sec, these things are just coming back at the same time. Why am I not really just splitting these things up independently?
Whereas,
sure, yeah, we can document it, but
I have kind of the same expectation of user behavior, but with the alternate of I would want them to come, like I would want all of the initial stuff first and then all of the deferred stuff second.
Right.
In most of my use cases, I certainly wouldn't want it spread over like hundreds of payloads because I've done hundreds of defers.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that behavior and making it so that I have to explicitly signpost it if I want to say, actually, these two things, I want them to run independently of each other.
Yeah.
As much as anything, I want to avoid that sort of explosion of future payloads. If we can avoid that and give the server and the network and the serialization and deserialization and the client writing to its store, all of those things, less work to do, then I'm happy.
Yep. Yeah, there's always trade-offs for sure. As long as people can opt out of that, then yeah, that makes sense.
But also, I think that, fragment aliases is still in very early stages and hasn't really been discussed all that much recently. So I would like us to be able to move forward with defer without being blocked by that proposal.
Yeah. Did I see that Matt did some recent progress on the fragment aliasing? I thought I saw some notifications come across. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't
That was fragment arguments.
Yeah, it was. Sorry.
Anyway, this other thing I wanted to discuss, which I think might actually be a symptom of the same issue of fields being executed multiple times when they're in defer, and figuring out a solution for that might resolve this. But if you have a query like this where there's a blog post and a field that's like most recent comment, you have IDs in there, you have author, and we'll assume that the client is something like relay, where it uses the ID field as its store key, and has follows like the specification that, you know, IDs are a global object, or a way to like globally identify objects. If the execution, like in the for this defer, does execute most recent comment separately than in the initial payload, and we'll say there was a new comment left in between the time that happened, and all of these IDs get deduplicated, you could get a situation where, you know, you have like details about the author, but now you have the bio comes in, but it's for a different person, and there's no way for a client to know that the initial data is now stale.
This wouldn't be an issue with the way that I was proposing earlier, the collect fields based approach, because there would be no second execution of most recent comment. Like it would already be carried through, and the selection would then be done on the pre-resolved value of the author that had already been pulled down with the ID and name. The bio would then be evaluated on that same object at a later stage. And I think it's essential that we do something like that. There should be no branching of the data, because that could just lead to huge amounts of confusion, I think.
Yeah, I agree that I think that this shows that that is essential if there's also going to be deduplication. Yeah, I'll give you some time to write it up, or if you just want to explain it to me over Discord or something, I could work on it. Either one works, and then I think that we should look at that and regroup again.
Yeah, this is actually like when we did the input union stuff, we came up with these sort of like decision points, and this is actually a decision point there that says if we don't deduplicate, then everything's fine because this won't break. But if we do deduplicate, then whatever solution we come up with must not cause confusion in this case. And we can now use this example as a criteria to apply to all of the different solutions, which I think is really, really valuable. This is a really valuable example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So aim to regroup. Is that the game plan?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Super quick question. What is the tracking issue for fragment aliases? Do we have like a very clear tracking issue somewhere? Because the original fragment aliases issue in the GraphQL spec repo was closed a long time ago. I'm just wondering if we have somewhere where that's clearly defined and there's somebody that's a champion for it, et cetera, et cetera.
I thought that there was a.
I think there's an RFC, but I don't think we're up
I
to.
couldn't find it. I was probably just looking in the wrong
Well,
place.
Let me dump the link.
RFC should be in working group repo under RFC. We move it from spec. No, not here, not in discussion, but in file.
Yeah, in the RFCs
in
folder.
file. Yeah.
It must just have a different name, so I didn't see it there.
Is it
No.
fragment modularity?
Oh, must
Yeah,
be.
yeah,
that's
There
it.
it is. There it is. Thank you. Yeah, I skipped right over it. Perfect. So is is this linked to an ongoing issue that's open somewhere?
I,
So I'm just
I
wondering
think the
if-
first step is fragment arguments, and I think, and then you know, sort of like we're building to that.
Got it.
But I
Yep.
might be wrong. I don't know. Does anyone else?
Yeah, but for this particular issue, for stream defer, we don't care about like
Arguments.
arguments. Yeah.
So should we like,
Correct.
I don't know, should we reopen this as a tracking issue? Oh, it says rejected on it, so maybe not.
I think so, because like previously, since we saying that people need to have control over these things, and we specifically remove label in favor that later it can be done with fragment alias. It's mean like we really consider fragment aliases, so it's at least like stage 1, right? So we really agreed that there is use case and we're working on it. So the whole idea,
There should be an
instead
issue.
of rejected, yeah,
Yeah.
instead of rejected, it should be stage 1. One thing I would suggest is to contact Matt and ask him if he want to be official champion, and if he want to be official and he have a capacity to be, in that case he will decide either like reopen old one or create new one, whatever will work for him. But I think we should ask him first, since he has the strongest use case. And issue was opened by him, right? One that was rejected.
No,
This issue, this is very old.
it was opened
Well,
by
maybe
Tim.
not very old, but the fragment modularity discussion, I think, came
From Matt.
quite a bit of time after this one was closed. So I don't think it makes sense to reopen this.
Okay. Yeah. In that case, yeah.
So we should just open a new issue? Because it feels like we need an issue that says, hey, this is open, it's at stage 1, so we can track it, know who the champion is, all that fun stuff. Unless it's there and I just can't find it.
Well, it is in there's the RFC here, right? I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the RFC
But it doesn't have.
Yeah.
But also, like, yeah, as Benji wrote in the chat, like, fragment aliases doesn't have to be the solution.
Right.
But we are like, I think we're in agreement that we don't want to solve that right now, and it could be fragment aliases, and if fragment aliases doesn't work out, it could be another. We could add back label or some other argument onto defer.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I was just curious about why that it doesn't have an associated issue that's
Yeah,
open.
so maybe I should have a discussion. Or I should update the one about removing label to say that.
Yeah, if
Is that
fragment
clear?
aliases aren't a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically putting in Benji's comment, I think would be awesome.
Okay.
Yes. So if I understand correctly, so previously I thought like, our communication, we specifically said like, at least during this discussion, alias fragments. And I assume like we move there. But in reality, what happened, we remove label as like making scope smaller. So
Yeah.
we're not like rejected as idea. We just said like, we don't want to, it's like the whole thing taking too much time. There is too many corner cases, too many stuff. So we'll figure out it later. Okay. In that case, one thing in future communication, like an issue, was not write it solved by alias fragments, but because like it will give false assumption. Like at least I thought like we switch fully to alias fragments.
Yeah, it makes sense to be more clear about that. Yeah, basically those two issues that I want was what I wanted to to talk about today. I don't have anything else right now. Did anyone else want to go over anything else, or?
If we, I'm sorry. So do we have like a new algorithm that we're going to potentially work on? I'm sorry, I dropped off, unfortunately, due to connectivity.
Yeah, Benji said that he was going to write something up this week for us to work off of.
Okay, great. I mean, using the algorithm we have, we could introduce. I mean, right now we are caching based on whether leaves have been sent for deduplication. It's very easy to add in, instead of to make sure that we don't re-execute anything. I mean, that's very easy to add in to again based on the path. Is that something that would solve these issues?
I'm worried that just that if it's an algorithm that still like tries to execute things, but we just rely on a cache, that is like making a trade-off for more memory that may not be the right trade-off.
Okay.
Also, just to be clear, I'm probably going to write some spec edits rather than actual code. Just because I think I have a better idea of what I would do in terms of the spec edits, and then we can port that to code and vice versa.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. All right, is that it? That's all. Reclaim a few minutes on a Monday.
Oh yeah, and for this issue, that is it's still listed as an open question, but this is the one where basically we're saying that we're removing labels and merging everything under the same object. I feel like that it is like mostly settled, but I'm leaving it open. I was thinking that it would stay open until we do like agree on deduplication, just in case the whole idea of deduplication somehow backtracks all the way to here to change this decision. But I think that moving forward in this is like has the assumption that this one is settled. Does that make sense?
Yeah, with the understanding that there's some way to opt out of it, I think.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds right to me. Cool. All right. Anything else? On with Monday. The end of
Thanks,
Monday
everyone.
for some of us. Hope you're feeling better, Benji.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care, all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, all. Bye.